Emily Parker pulled off her gloves and tossed them into the bin, feeling the familiar ache in her shoulders settle in as the clock above the nurse's station blinked past 7:02 a.m. The night shift at St. Michael's Medical Center in Chicago had been long, but not the worst she had seen. 1 heart attack, 2 car accident victims, and an older woman with pneumonia who kept trying to crack jokes between coughing fits. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead, tinting everyone's skin a tired shade of grey. Outside the high windows at the end of the corridor, the first trace of daylight tried to push through a layer of winter clouds. Snow still rimmed the sidewalks from the previous week's storm, and cars moved slowly along the streets, headlights fading against the early morning haze. Emily signed off on her last chart, double-checking the medication list for Mr. Harrington in room 412. Accuracy was second nature to her now. She had spent 8 years in this hospital, mostly on nights, where mistakes could hide in the shadows and only discipline and habit kept them from turning into tragedies. "Emily, you heading out?" Lisa, another nurse in her unit, shuffled over, tying her blonde hair into a messy bun. Her scrubs were creased, dark circles visible under her eyes. "Yeah," Emily answered, slipping her pen into the pocket of her navy blue scrub top. "If I don't leave now, I might just lie down on the supply room floor and stay here until next week." Lisa let out a tired laugh. "I get it. You taking the train?" "Probably. My car's still in the shop." Emily tugged her jacket from the back of her chair and slipped it on. The fabric was thin, not ideal for Chicago's January wind, but payday was still a week away. She walked past the row of patient rooms, pausing instinctively to listen for any unusual sound. An alarm, a sudden cough, a cry. The hallway, for the moment, was quiet. A janitor pushed a cleaning cart along the polished floor. A resident physician leaned against a wall, typing notes into a tablet, his eyes half closed with fatigue. At the far end of the corridor, Emily's gaze lingered for a second on room 317. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, the bed was neatly made, the machines turned off. She remembered the man who had been there 3 nights ago, the one who had arrived close to midnight, bleeding through his shirt, refusing to give a name. He had been brought in by 2 men who said little and stayed less than 5 minutes. They had signed a form with barely legible signatures, muttering something about a work accident. Emily had known immediately that it was a lie. The bullet wound in his side and the bruises along his ribs told a different story. He hadn't looked like the usual victims she saw after a bar fight or a robbery. His hair had been neatly cut, his watch expensive, his shirt an Italian brand she recognized only because she had once walked past a display window and checked the price out of curiosity. His eyes, dark and alert even under sedation, had tracked every person entering the room, as if calculating risk in every movement. 3-17 is empty again, right? Lisa glanced over Emily's shoulder, following her line of sight. "Yeah," Emily replied, forcing herself to look away. "He was transferred yesterday morning. Private facility, I think." Lisa shrugged, already losing interest. "As long as administration signed off. Come on, go home before they find a reason to keep you." She gave Emily a quick, one-armed hug and headed back toward the station. Emily walked to the staff locker room, spinning the code on her small metal locker. Inside were her worn jeans, a grey sweater, her tote bag, and a photo of her younger brother Noah, grinning into the camera with a skateboard under his arm. The picture was 6 years old, taken before he had moved to Portland, before their phone calls had turned from weekly to monthly, then occasionally. She changed quickly, folded her scrubs, and shoved them into the bottom of the locker. Once dressed, she wrapped a scarf around her neck and checked her phone. No missed calls, just a message from her landlord reminding her that the heat repair in the building would take another few days. She sighed, imagining another evening spent in her apartment, wearing 2 pairs of socks and nursing a cup of cheap tea. The hospital lobby was already waking up by the time she reached the ground floor. Families clustered by the information desk. A delivery person rolled a cart of supplies through the automatic doors. A TV in the corner played morning news on low volume. Footage of a crime scene somewhere on the south side. Police lights flashing blue and red against a line of brick houses. Emily did not slow down to watch. Violence was background noise in Chicago. She had learned early on to tune it out unless it arrived on a stretcher. The icy air hit her face as soon as she stepped outside. She drew her scarf higher, breath forming little clouds in front of her as she crossed the parking lot. The city smelled faintly of exhaust, wet concrete, and distant coffee. Taxis came and went along the curb, their engines idling, drivers glancing at their phones between fares. It was a 20-minute walk to the nearest train station, then another 15 on the Blue Line to her neighborhood. Usually, Emily did not mind the commute. It gave her time to let the night drain out of her system before she set foot in her apartment. Tonight, or rather this morning, she felt unusually restless, her mind drifting back to room 317 and the way the man's hand had gripped her wrist when he had briefly woken up. "Don't call the cops," he had whispered, voice hoarse but urgent. "Please." She had told him that her job was to treat whoever came through the doors, not to investigate how they got hurt. It was the truth, mostly. Yet she had mentioned his case to the attending physician, suggesting that maybe security or administration should take a look at the paperwork. By the next shift, he was gone, transferred without warning. No name left on the chart, just a notation. Moved to private facility per family request. Halfway down the block, Emily stopped into a small cafe that catered to hospital staff. A narrow space, lined with wooden shelves and a front window, perpetually fogged. The barista, a middle-aged man with a salt and pepper beard, greeted her with a nod. "The usual?" he asked. "Yeah, thanks," she replied, pulling a few dollars from her pocket. He handed her a paper cup a minute later, lid securely snapped on. "You look beat." "Double shift next week," she said. "You'll see me looking worse." He smiled faintly. "I'll keep the coffee strong." With the warm cup between her hands, Emily continued her walk. Traffic thickened as she neared the train station, the city shedding its sleepy layer as more people filled the sidewalks. Office workers in long coats, students with backpacks, a woman in scrubs from another hospital talking rapidly into her phone. By the time Emily reached her stop and boarded the train, the car was already crowded. She found a standing spot near the door, braced herself against the railing, and watched the city slide past in blurred streaks of brick, glass, and graffiti. Her reflection in the window stared back, brown hair pulled into a loose ponytail. Pale skin, tired eyes that still scanned, still evaluated, as if she were always on duty. She thought about calling Noah, just to hear a familiar voice, but the time difference meant he was likely still asleep. Besides, she did not have the energy for the inevitable conversation about how she worked too much and lived too little. When she finally reached her stop on the west side and climbed the station stairs, the wind had picked up. Her neighborhood was a mix of old brick apartment buildings and small, newly renovated cafes, trying to attract younger residents. A corner grocery store displayed crates of fruit out front, and a bus rumbled past, trailing the smell of diesel. Her building stood halfway down the block, 4 stories of aging brick with metal fire escapes zigzagging down the rear. The lobby was small and worn, with chipped tiles and a row of mailboxes that stuck when you tried to open them. Emily climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, counting each step out of habit. Inside her apartment, the quiet hit her first. She locked the door, turned the deadbolt, and set her keys on the small table by the entrance. The space was modest but carefully kept. A grey couch, a second-hand wooden coffee table, a small TV, a bookshelf crowded with medical textbooks and a few novels she never quite finished. Thin curtains let in a pale, cold light. The heater rattled faintly, pushing out air that was more lukewarm than warm. Emily set her coffee on the counter and shrugged off her coat, hanging it carefully. She kicked off her shoes and walked to the narrow galley kitchen, glancing automatically at the stove knobs to make sure everything was off. It was a ritual from childhood, back when her mother used to ask twice if she had checked the gas. Her phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up and saw a new message from her manager at the hospital. Reminder, mandatory staff meeting Friday 6 p.m. Attendance required. She exhaled slowly. There went another evening. She walked to the window and looked down at the street. From this angle, the block looked almost peaceful. A dog tugged impatiently at its owner's leash. A delivery truck double-parked, hazard lights blinking. A woman pushed a stroller across the crosswalk, head buried in her scarf. Emily took a sip of coffee and felt the hot liquid burn her tongue slightly. The fatigue was settling deeper now, heavy behind her eyes. She told herself that she would take a quick shower, maybe eat something simple, and then sleep until late afternoon. The rest of the day could wait. She had just turned toward the bathroom when a distant vibration reached her. A low, uneven thrum that did not match the usual city soundtrack. At first she ignored it, assuming it was construction or a truck idling somewhere nearby. But the sound grew louder, more insistent, a chopping roar that seemed to press against the window glass. Emily frowned and went back to the window. She pushed the curtain aside and stared. A helicopter was descending over the street, its rotors sending trash swirling along the sidewalks, stirring people's coats and hair as they looked up, shielding their faces. The machine was sleek and dark, clearly not a news chopper or a medical transport. It hovered for a moment, as if choosing a precise spot, then lowered toward the empty stretch of road right in front of her building. Her heart started to race. This was not normal, not even for Chicago. She watched as cars braked abruptly, drivers leaning on their horns in confusion and anger. The helicopter's downdraft rattled window panes and slammed a loose sign against a nearby lamppost. Trash cans along the curb shook, lids clattering. People on the sidewalk backed away, some recording with their phones. Emily took an involuntary step back from the window, one hand tightening around her coffee cup. The part of her brain trained to remain calm in emergencies tried to take over. Assess, observe, don't panic. But there was no protocol in her nursing manuals for helicopters landing on residential streets. The aircraft finally settled, skids touching the asphalt with a small jolt. The rotors continued to spin, whipping the air. A side door slid open and two men in dark coats stepped out, scanning the surroundings with a kind of practiced vigilance that made Emily's skin prickle. Their movements were controlled, coordinated. They were not police. There were no visible badges, no uniforms. A third man appeared behind them, his coat longer, his posture straight and deliberate. Even from 3 floors up, Emily sensed a presence about him, the way people shifted unconsciously to make room, even those at a distance. His hair was dark, combed back neatly. He wore a suit under the coat, the tie perfectly knotted despite the chaos of the landing. For a brief second he looked up toward the building, his gaze sweeping across the rows of windows. Emily froze, irrationally certain that his eyes stopped on hers. Her mind flashed back to room 317, to the man on the hospital bed, to the way his jaw had clenched when the pain spiked, and the tone in his voice when he had begged her not to call the police. The shape of his face in her memory aligned almost perfectly with the man now standing beside the helicopter. "No," she whispered to herself, heart pounding. "That doesn't make sense." On the street, the man spoke to one of his companions, who nodded and lifted a hand. A black SUV screeched to a halt at the end of the block, then another behind it. Doors opened, and more men stepped out, spreading with cold precision along the sidewalks bordering her building's entrance. This was not random. They were here with a purpose. Emily's first instinct was to step away, to move somewhere they could not see her, yet a strange, morbid curiosity rooted her in place. She watched as the man in the long coat walked slowly toward her building, his gaze lifting again. Her apartment buzzer sounded, sharp and jarring. Emily flinched, nearly dropping her coffee. The noise cut through the whir of the helicopter, echoing in the small apartment. It persisted in a long, insistent ring, then stopped, only to start again a second later. Her chest tightened. No one ever used the front buzzer for her. Deliveries went to the lobby. Friends, the few she had in the city, texted first. She forced herself to move, setting the cup carefully on the table. Each step toward the intercom felt deliberate and slow, like walking through water. She pressed the button and brought the receiver to her ear. "Hello?" Her voice came out thinner than she intended. There was a burst of static. Then a calm male voice, low and distinct, came through. "Miss Emily Parker?" Her stomach dropped. "Yes. Who is this?" A brief pause, as if the speaker were measuring each word. "Please come downstairs. We need to speak with you." She swallowed. "About what?" "It will be easier in person, madam." The way he said the word made something inside her go cold. It was not mocking, but it carried a formality she associated with people used to command, not request. Emily hesitated, her mind scrambling for options. Refuse, call the police, pretend she was not home. Yet whoever this was already knew her name, her address, and had arrived by helicopter with a small army lining the street. If she stalled too long, they might come up instead. She looked back at the window. The man in the long coat now stood directly in front of her building's entrance, head tilted slightly upward. Even from here, there was no mistaking the faint scar along his jawline, the same one she had noticed when cleaning the blood from his skin in the emergency room. He had survived. He had found her. Emily heard her own voice before she fully decided. "I'll be right down." She hung up, heart thudding against her ribs, and reached mechanically for her coat. As she slipped her arms into the sleeves, she caught her reflection in the small mirror by the door. She looked smaller somehow, out of place in her own life. The hallway outside her apartment was quiet as she stepped out, locking the door behind her with fingers that wanted to shake. The distant thrum of the helicopter seeped through the walls, a constant reminder that whatever waited below was far from ordinary. Emily descended the stairs one flight at a time, the metal railing cool beneath her hand. On the second-floor landing, she almost turned back, but each step down felt like a thread pulling her towards something she did not yet understand, something that had begun the moment an unknown man with a bullet wound had been wheeled into her care. When she reached the ground floor and pushed open the front door, the cold air rushed in, sharp and filled with the smell of fuel and winter. The man in the long coat stood just beyond the threshold, framed by the noise and motion behind him. Up close, his features were sharper, his eyes dark and observant. "Ms. Parker," he said, his voice steady, carrying easily over the background roar. "Thank you for coming down." He inclined his head slightly, almost a gesture of respect. "My name is Raphael Moretti," he continued. "I owe you my life." Then, with a faint, unreadable smile, he added, "Madam." Emily's sneakers met the cold pavement, her heartbeat echoing the whir of helicopter blades as she approached Raphael Moretti. The street, moments before empty, now felt impossibly crowded. Every window flickered with suspicious, watchful eyes. Raphael's stoic expression softened as Emily stopped in front of him. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly, lowering his voice beneath the rush of wind. Emily hesitated. "Do I really have a choice?" A faint, almost sad smile touched his lips. "That depends on what you believe about fate." She hugged her arms around herself. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," Raphael answered, stepping aside to gesture toward a black SUV parked beside the curb. "Just a conversation. Please, somewhere quieter." Emily's gut warned her to run, but reason reminded her. Right now, refusal could invite even more attention and risk. She nodded, sliding into the back seat. Raphael followed, and the doors closed with a hush that seemed to seal her fate for good. The car crept away from the chaos, turning onto empty streets. The interior was immaculate, the faint scent of leather mingling with expensive cologne. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Raphael broke the silence. "You saved my life 3 nights ago. I was told that without your intervention, I wouldn't have made it." Emily remembered the blood, the smell of fear, the relentless pace of her night shift. "I had no idea who you were. I just saw someone who needed help." "That is why you are here," Raphael said softly. "I do not expect gratitude, but loyalty is a rare thing in my world. You showed it for no reason but kindness." She bristled. "I'm not loyal to you. I only did my job." Raphael nodded. "Understood. But your involvement now marks you as a target to some. My enemies are thorough." Panic churned in Emily's stomach. "So I'm being punished for helping." "Protected," Raphael corrected. "I intend to keep you safe, but I cannot do that if you return to your life as if nothing happened." Emily's gaze dropped to her hands. "If I disappear, people will notice. I have patients, friends, responsibilities." A silent beat passed. Raphael leaned back, looking pensive. "You won't disappear, but your routine will change for now. My men will watch you, discreetly. If you're ever uncomfortable, you can refuse their help. But there are risks either way." The SUV slowed, pulling into a quiet riverside park. Lamplight glimmered off the water, reflecting Chicago's skyline in shimmering smudges. Raphael stepped out first and waited, a silent invitation. Emily joined him, feeling the city's enormity stretch out around them. "Why me?" Emily's voice trembled. "Of all the nurses, why did it have to be me?" Raphael paused, searching for words. "I ask myself the same question every morning, perhaps destiny, or perhaps just coincidence. But our choices tonight will ripple further than either of us can see." She stared into the night, conflicted, resentful of her lost normal life, but grudgingly grateful for Raphael's honesty. "I want to help people, not get dragged into wars." Raphael met her eyes. "Nor do I, but we can't always control the debts life hands us." For a long minute, the only sound was water lapping against stone. "Will you let my men protect you?" Raphael asked, his tone gentle. Emily weighed fear and pride. Finally, she nodded. "If that's the safest way, for now." Raphael let out a breath. "Thank you, Emily, for your trust and for your courage." The city lights flickered behind them, each one a silent witness to the bargain 2 strangers had just made, an agreement that would reach further than either dared to imagine. Emily awoke the next morning to a feeling she could not name. Something unsettled pressed at the edges of her consciousness. The sunlight streaked through her blinds, illuminating the untouched cup of tea she'd left on her kitchen counter the night before. Every small sound in her quiet apartment put her on edge, as if the city outside was holding its breath. As she prepared for her shift, Emily noticed a black sedan idling down the block. She closed the curtains quickly, pacing the narrow hallway. It was barely 7, yet she'd already checked her phone 3 times, half expecting a message from Raphael or one of his men. At the hospital, routine offered comfort, charting vitals, prepping beds, answering calls, but the sense of normalcy was fragile. Emily caught herself glancing over her shoulder more often than necessary, watching unfamiliar faces pass through the corridors. 2 men in plain clothes lingered near the entrance. She recognized one from the night before, discreet but there. "Nervous?" asked her colleague, Sarah, catching up as Emily washed her hands at the sink. Emily managed a tight smile. "Just tired. The city's gotten weird lately, hasn't it?" Sarah grinned. "Always has been." But beneath the banter, Emily felt the weight of secrets she could not share. Some moments she doubted her decision to accept protection, to avoid the police, to trust a stranger whose world revolved around debts and codes. Mid-shift, a commotion broke out in the ER. A man had been attacked only blocks from the hospital. The pattern was familiar. Violence had come closer to her world. Emily's mind scanned for connections, wondering if she was seeing the first tremor of something bigger. Later, as she left for the night, the same black sedan pulled to the curb. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out. "Emily Parker." His voice was neutral, his eyes carefully unreadable. She hesitated, but nodded. "Are you with Raphael?" The man inclined his head. "Yes, ma'am. My name's Vincent. I'll see you home." Emily's instincts rebelled. They screamed for distance, for independence. But the look on Vincent's face was steady, almost reassuring. Whatever his world, he understood the importance of boundaries. They drove in silence. The city slipped by, windows aglow with 1,000 private dramas. Emily stared out, lost in thought, until Vincent spoke. "It gets easier," he said gently. "The first days are always the hardest." Emily looked at him, hearing a note of empathy she hadn't expected. "Will it ever be normal again?" A pause. "Not the old kind of normal, but a new kind. You find it. Eventually." Home again, safe but not at peace, Emily stood at her window long after Vincent left. The city pulsed its endless rhythms, indifferent to her turmoil. She wasn't sure if relief or dread was stronger, but she knew that for all the new rules, she still had choices, and tomorrow those choices might become everything. The days blurred, marked by new routines and growing unease. Emily had grown accustomed to the silent protection. Vincent's car, a distant shadow on quiet streets, unfamiliar faces at familiar corners. Yet the sense of safety was always paired with the tension of being watched. News of violence in the city began to spread among hospital staff. Nurses whispered about the attacks nearby, the rise in armed guards at luxury buildings, the hush that fell whenever police arrived on the floor. One afternoon, as Emily finished changing a patient's IV, her supervisor approached with a measured smile. "Emily, could I see you in my office for a moment?" Inside, the blinds were drawn. The walls felt closer than usual. "We've had some questions about visitors," her supervisor began carefully. "Some of your colleagues have noticed people waiting for you after your shift. Is everything all right?" Emily forced a steady breath. "Yes, it's just after-hours car service. Family wanted me to stay safe." A small nod, a scribble of a pen. "We just want to be sure you're supported. If there's anything you need, let us know." She left the office both relieved and unsettled, knowing the thin line between safety and suspicion was now part of her daily life. That night, Raphael called her for the first time. His voice was quieter, gentler than she expected. "I wanted to apologize," he said, "for the disruptions. My world has consequences, even for those who do not choose it." Emily considered her response, choosing honesty. "Everything's changed. I don't know how to trust any of this, not you, not your men, not myself." There was a pause. "You shouldn't have to. All I can promise is that it won't last forever. When it is safe, you'll get your life back." Silence stretched between them, filled with city noise and memories they now shared. Emily realized she was waiting not just for protection, but for answers, to understand what she had become part of, willingly or not. Outside, city lights blinked beneath gathering rain. Emily watched the glass bead and slide down her window, the pattern unpredictable, much like her new reality. For the first time, she wondered if survival would cost more than she had ever imagined.